English title: My son let his wife throw mop water on me. They had no idea I was the secret guest of honor at the gala they were attending that night. Vietnamese title: Contre toi de mac vo no hat nuoc lao na veo nuoi toi. Chung kong he beat toi la vi kok den du bi mat tai bui de teak ma chung tam du toi ham du. The velvet curtain felt heavy in my hand, the fabric thick with dust and anticipation. On the other side of it, I could hear the low murmur of 1,000 conversations, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet. It was a world away from my own. A voice, smooth and practiced, echoed through the speakers backstage. And in just a few moments, the MC announced, his voice booming with practiced charisma, we will have the distinct honor of introducing the very heart of the Starlight Foundation, the anonymous benefactor who, for 10 years, has chosen to remain in the shadows, letting their incredible work speak for itself. Tonight, for the first time, they have agreed to step into the light. A knot tightened in my stomach. My palms were slick with a nervous sweat. The dress I was wearing, a deep midnight blue silk that the stylist had called divine, felt like a costume. It was beautiful. I knew that. Probably cost more than my car. But it wasn't me. Or at least, it wasn't the me the world knew. I took a deep breath. The air tasting of hairspray and electricity. I thought of my son, Michael, and his wife, Jessica, sitting out there in that glittering crowd. They were so desperate to be a part of this world, so eager to rub shoulders with the city's elite. They had no idea that the person they were most ashamed of was the very reason they were all gathered here tonight. A stagehand gave me a thumbs up from across the wing. It was almost time. I closed my eyes for a second, and a different image flooded my mind. Not the shimmer of crystal chandeliers, but the grimy, gray water sloshing in a mop bucket. Not the scent of expensive perfume, but the stinging, chemical smell of floor cleaner. I opened my eyes again, my resolve hardening like steel. I smoothed the front of my gown. The MC was building to his final crescendo. When I walked out onto that stage, I would look at them, and I would begin my speech with the words that had been burning in my heart for 3 days. Tonight, I would say, I want to talk about true value, and how some people can't see it, even when it's standing right in front of them, soaking wet in dirty water. But my story doesn't start here. Under the glittering lights of the grand ballroom. Starts 3 days ago. In the quiet solitude of my own home. With the smell of old books and brewing betrayal. My house sits on a quiet, tree-lined street in a part of Chicago that developers haven't gotten around to gentrifying yet. It's a small brick bungalow. The kind built for factory foremen and their families 100 years ago. Sturdy, reliable, and unpretentious. Much like my late husband, Arthur. He bought it for us when Michael was just a baby. It's a start, Ellie, Heath said, his eyes shining with a hope that could have powered the whole city. A good, solid start. We had so many dreams back then. Arthur and I. We weren't just dreamers, though. We were builders. While I raised Michael, Arthur tinkered in the garage, turning his brilliant, complicated ideas about data processing into something tangible. I was his first investor, using a small inheritance from my grandmother. I was his sounding board, his partner, the one who managed the books while he wrestled with code. Together, we built a company from nothing. It grew bigger and faster than we ever imagined. But we never left the bungalow. We never changed. The money was a tool, a means to an end. It was for Michael's future, and for the future of others we hoped to help someday. Then, 10 years ago, I lost him. A sudden heart attack stole the light of my life. The company, our shared dream, felt hollow without him. So I sold it. The number that appeared in my bank account was staggering, almost comical. It was more money than 10 families could spend in 10 lifetimes. And it meant nothing to me. So I created the Starlight Foundation, in his memory. And I stayed in my little brick house, I found a quiet joy working part-time at O'Malley's second-hand books, surrounded by the comforting scent of aging paper. I tended my garden. I lived a simple life. It was a life of my own choosing. A life that honored the man Arthur was, not the fortune he had left behind. It was a life my son and his wife simply could not understand. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garden, my hands deep in the rich, dark soil, coaxing my tomato plants to life. "Mom?" Michael's voice was tight, stressed. He always sounded like that lately. "Michael, honey, is everything all right?" Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, Jess and I were thinking of stopping by this afternoon. We need to talk to you about something." Needing to talk never meant a casual chat. It meant a lecture was coming. It meant Jessica had a new project, me. "Of course," I said, forcing a warmth I didn't feel. "I'll put the kettle on." An hour later, a sleek, black SUV that looked completely out of place on my humble street pulled up to the curb. Michael and Jessica emerged. He was in a tailored suit that looked too restrictive. His jaw clenched. She was a vision in cream-colored linen. Her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. A large, expensive-looking handbag clutched in her hand like a shield. She kissed the air beside my cheek as she entered. "Eleanor, the place looks just the same." It wasn't a compliment. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of my living room, the worn armchair where Arthur used to sit, the faded floral wallpaper, the shelves overflowing with books instead of curated art objects. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Pity? Disgust? "It's good to see you both," I said, retreating to the safety of the kitchen. "Tea's almost ready." They followed me in. Michael leaned against the counter, avoiding my gaze, while Jessica stood in the center of the room, radiating a restless, critical energy. "So," she began, not waiting for the tea, "Michael has some exciting news. His firm landed a corporate table at the Starlight Foundation Gala this weekend." "Oh, how wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased for him. I knew the gala was the most exclusive charity event of the year. I also knew that, as the foundation's founder, I could have gotten them the best table in the house with a single phone call. But they didn't know that. To them, I was just Eleanor Vance, the widow in the old bungalow. "It's more than wonderful, Eleanor. It's critical," Jessica said, her tone sharp. "This is the event. Everyone who is anyone in Chicago will be there. We're talking CEOs, old money, philanthropists. This is Michael's chance to network, to make the connections that could change his entire career." "I understand," I said quietly, placing 3 mugs on the counter. "I'm very proud of you, Michael." He finally looked at me, a flicker of the old, sweet boy I knew in his eyes. "Thanks, Mom." But Jessica wasn't finished. She was just warming up. "Which brings us to why we're here," she continued, her voice softening into a tone of feigned concern that always set my teeth on edge. "We were thinking, well, we want you to come with us." I was so surprised. I nearly dropped the sugar bowl. "Me? To the gala?" "Yes," she said, her smile a little too bright. "But, and please don't take this the wrong way, we need to make a few adjustments." I looked from her perfectly manicured nails to Michael's suddenly fascinating shoes. "Adjustments?" "Your look, Eleanor," Jessica said, waving a dismissive hand. "Your presentation. You can't show up at an event like that looking like, well, like you do." The words landed like small, sharp stones. I was wearing my favorite cardigan, a soft, well-loved garment, and a simple cotton dress. My gardening clothes. I knew I wasn't dressed for a party, but the sting of her words went deeper than that. She wasn't just talking about my clothes. She was talking about my life. "Jess," Michael muttered. a faint flush rising on his neck. No, Michael. Needs to be said. She insisted, her voice gaining strength. We love your mother. But we're trying to build a life here. A brand. Perception is everything. When people ask who we are, and they see this, she gestured around my cozy, lived-in kitchen as if it were a slum. It sends the wrong message. It makes us look unserious. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had raised to be kind and respectful, to see the value in people, not in their possessions. And he just stood there, staring at the floor, letting her say these things. He was ashamed of me. I see, I said, my voice barely a whisper. My hands felt cold. It's not a big deal, Jessica chirped, oblivious or indifferent to the wound she had just inflicted. It'll be fun. Like a makeover. We'll take you shopping. Get your hair done. A manicure. We can find you a nice, modern dress. Something appropriate. It's for your own good. Really. And for ours. She was smiling. A bright, predatory smile. She thought she was doing me a favor. She was trying to erase every trace of the woman I was, the woman Arthur had loved, and replace her with a sanitized, acceptable version that wouldn't embarrass them at their fancy party. I stood there in my kitchen, the familiar scent of lemon and old wood surrounding me, and I felt utterly, completely alone. I looked at my son's face, a face I knew better than my own, and saw a stranger looking back. A stranger who was willing to trade his mother's dignity for a chance to climb a social ladder. The tea kettle began to whistle. A shrill, piercing scream that seemed to echo the silent one in my heart. The afternoon was no longer quiet. It was filled with the clamor of their ambition and the shattering of my own illusions. The real story, the one that would end on that glittering stage, had just begun. The whistling of the kettle was a welcome distraction. It gave me a reason to turn my back on them, to busy my hands with the simple, familiar task of pouring hot water over tea bags. My hands were trembling slightly. I gripped the handle of the kettle, focusing on the weight of it, the heat radiating from its metal surface. Anything to ground me. I don't think that will be necessary, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I placed the mugs on a tray, my movements deliberate and slow. What do you mean? Jessica's voice was laced with disbelief, as if I just turned down a winning lottery ticket. Eleanor, this isn't really a request. This is an opportunity. For all of us. I turned around, tray in hand, and looked her straight in the eye. I appreciate the offer, Jessica, but I'm not going to the gala. Michael finally spoke, his voice strained. Mom, please, just listen to her. She's just trying to help. Help? The word came out sharper than I intended. Help me with what? Michael, help me become someone I'm not? So that your new friends won't be offended by my presentation? I set the tray down on the small kitchen table with a soft clatter. The last time I checked, there was nothing wrong with who I am. Of course not, Jessica said, her tone dripping with condescension. You're perfectly fine for this life. She gestured around the kitchen again. But we're trying to move into a different world. A world with different rules. It's not about you. It's about what's best for Michael's career. What's best for his career is for him to be good at his job, to be a man of integrity and character. I replied, my voice rising slightly. Values you and Arthur taught me. I added, looking directly at my son. Values that have nothing to do with the price of my dress or the age of my wallpaper. Michael flinched as if I'd struck him. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just stared into his mug of untouched tea. The silence in the room was thick and heavy, filled with unspoken accusations. Jessica, however, was undeterred. She saw this as a negotiation, and she was not one to lose. Eleanor, Let's be practical, she said, shifting her tactics. She leaned forward, placing her elbows on my old wooden table. You live this quiet life. You work in that dusty old bookstore. You don't understand the pressures we're under. The competition. Image is everything. If we're going to succeed, we need to present a united, polished front, a successful family. And I am a blemish on that polished front? I asked, my heart aching with every word. She didn't say that, Mom. Michael mumbled, but it was a weak defense. He didn't believe it himself. It's an investment, Eleanor. An investment in our future. Jessica pressed on. Think of it as helping your son. The manipulation was so blatant, so shameless, it took my breath away. She was using my love for Michael as a weapon against me. For a moment, I almost faltered. The maternal instinct to do anything for my child, to sacrifice my own pride for his happiness, rose up in me. But then I looked at his bowed head, at the shame radiating from him, not shame for his wife's cruelty, but shame for my very existence, and something inside me hardened. This wasn't for Michael's happiness. This was for Jessica's ambition. And Michael was letting it happen. My answer is no, I said, my voice firm. I am not going. And I would appreciate it if you would stop trying to remake me into someone you find more acceptable. Jessica sat back, her face a mask of cold fury. She had lost. The feigned concern vanished, replaced by a barely concealed contempt. Fine, she snapped. Fine. Stay here in your little museum. Don't say we didn't try to include you. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her handbag. Michael, we're leaving. Michael looked up, his face a miserable portrait of conflict. He looked at me, then at his wife. He wanted to say something. I could see it. An apology. Perhaps. An excuse. But he said nothing. He simply pushed himself away from the counter and followed her towards the door. A loyal, defeated soldier. At the threshold of the living room, Jessica paused. She turned back. Strange, calculating look in her eyes. You know, the house is looking a little grimy, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You should really be more careful. An old woman like you, living alone. So easy to let things go. And with that parting shot, they were gone. The front door clicked shut. And a moment later, I heard the powerful engine of their SUV roar to life and fade down the street. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the silence they left behind ringing in my ears. The tea was getting cold. I felt a profound sense of loss, a grief that was different from the one I felt when Arthur died. That had been a clean, sharp wound. This was a slow-acting poison. I had not just lost my son to a woman. I had lost him to an idea. The idea that what you have is more important than who you are. The rest of the week was a blur of forced normalcy. I went to work at the bookstore. The familiar scent of paper and ink a comforting balm. I arranged books on shelves, helped customers find forgotten treasures, and tried not to think about the gala. I tried not to think about Michael and Jessica, stepping into a world of glamour and influence. While I was left behind, a relic they were eager to discard. Saturday arrived, the day of the gala. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, a perfect day for a party. I spent the morning in my garden, pulling weeds with a vengeance, my fingers digging into the cool earth. It was grounding, real. I wouldn't let them ruin this for me. I wouldn't let them take away my peace. Around noon, my doorbell rang. My heart gave a hopeful leap. Maybe it was Michael. Maybe he had come to his senses, come to apologize. But when I opened the door, it was only Jessica. She was alone. She was dressed in casual, but expensive, athletic wear. She was holding a large, designer water bottle. Jessica, I said, surprised. Where's Michael? He had a last-minute meeting. she said, breezing past me into the house. Some final prep for tonight. But I wanted to come and try one more time. Her tone was different today. Softer. More conciliatory. I was immediately suspicious. There's nothing more to say, I told her, closing the door. Please, Eleanor, she said, her eyes wide and pleading. I was awful the other day. I was stressed, and I handled it all wrong. I'm so sorry. I get so carried away with this stuff. Michael was so upset with me. He loves you so much. The words were a balm to my bruised heart, even though a part of me knew they were calculated. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe my son still loved me, that he stood up for me. He just wants you to be a part of our life, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. All of our life. The fancy parts and the normal parts. I was wrong to try and change you. Can you forgive me? I looked at her. At this beautiful, polished woman who seemed to be offering an olive branch. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe she was just young and misguided. Of course, I said, my resolve softening. We can forget it. Thank you, she breathed, a relieved smile spreading across her face. You know, I feel so terrible. I just want to do something to help. You looked so tired the other day. Why don't you sit down? Put your feet up? Let me, I don't know, tidy up for you a little bit? As a peace offering. Oh, no, you don't have to do that. I protested. I insist, she said, already looking around. Her eyes landed on the mop and bucket I had left by the back door after cleaning the kitchen floor that morning. Perfect. I'll just give the floors a quick once-over. You relax. Please. Before I could argue further, she had picked up the bucket. The water was still in it, gray and murky. She carried it into the living room. It was all so strange, so out of character. Jessica Vance did not mop floors. But I was so desperate for a truce, so tired of the conflict, that I let my guard down. I sat in my armchair, the one she had silently criticized, and watched her. She moved with an awkward, theatrical energy, sloshing the mop around the hardwood floors. She was making more of a mess than she was cleaning. She worked her way across the room, getting closer to where I was sitting. It's just so important to Michael that we're a family, she said, panting slightly with the effort. He's so proud of where he comes from. Really. He just gets. She was right in front of my chair now. Her back was to me. A little clumsy when he's stressed. As she said the word clumsy, her foot seemed to catch on the edge of the rug. She let out a small, theatrical cry of oops, and stumbled. The bucket tilted in her hands. Time seemed to slow down. I saw it happening, but I couldn't react quickly enough. A tidal wave of cold, grimy, foul-smelling water surged from the bucket, crashed over me, drenching me from my neck to my feet. It soaked through my dress, my slip, plastering the cold, wet fabric to my skin. The dirty water ran in rivulets down my legs and pooled around my shoes. I gasped, the shock of the cold stealing my breath. Jessica spun around, her hands flying to her mouth in mock horror. Oh my God. Eleanor. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I can't believe I did that. I'm just so clumsy. I stared at her, dripping and shivering, and in her eyes, behind the performance of shock and concern, I saw it, a flicker of triumph, a glint of pure, unadulterated malice. It wasn't an accident. She had done it on purpose. At that exact moment, the front door opened and Michael walked in. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. His mother, soaking wet and covered in filth, and his wife, standing over me with an empty mop bucket, feigning distress. What happened? He stammered. Oh, Michael, Jessica cried, rushing to his side. It was a terrible accident. I was trying to help Eleanor clean up, and I tripped. I'm so sorry. Honey, I've made such a mess. He looked from her to me. My dress was clinging to me, the dirty water dripping onto the floor, creating a puddle of shame around my feet. I was shivering, not just from the cold, but from the humiliation. I looked at my son, pleading with my eyes for him to see the truth, to defend me. He looked at me, and my drenched, pathetic state, and his face, the face I loved more than any other in the world, crumpled, not in sympathy for me, but in embarrassment. His shoulders sagged. He let out a long, weary sigh, as if I were the greatest burden he had ever been forced to bear. He wouldn't look at me. He just looked at the puddle on the floor. Jess, he said, his voice quiet and defeated. Just go get some towels. He didn't rush to my side. He didn't ask if I was all right. He didn't challenge his wife's flimsy story. He just stood there, paralyzed by his own shame. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It died. The hopeful, loving mother was washed away, replaced by a woman cold and clear as ice. It's all right, Michael, I said, my voice eerily calm. I stood up, water squelching in my shoes. Don't bother with the towels. I think I've had enough of your help for one day. I walked past him, leaving a trail of dirty water on the floor, and went to my room to change. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The time for lessons was about to begin. Chchanroy. Twasibat dao voi hoi tu fan one. Hoi tu fan one. The chill of the dirty water seeped into my bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice forming around my heart. In the privacy of my bedroom, I peeled off the sodden dress, clung to my skin like a second, shameful layer. I dropped it in a heap on the bathroom floor, a pathetic testament to my own foolishness. I had wanted to believe in the possibility of peace, in the goodness of my own son. That was my mistake. I stood under the hot spray of the shower, scrubbing my skin until it was red, as if I could wash away the humiliation along with the grime. But the feeling lingered. It was the feeling of being utterly devalued, of being seen as an obstacle, a piece of old furniture to be either polished up or thrown out. Michael's reaction, or lack thereof, was the cruelest blow. His silence was a verdict. It declared me guilty of being an embarrassment. As the water sluiced over me, a new feeling began to bubble up through the cold shock and the searing pain. Anger. It was a clean, hot anger that burned away the tears before they could form. It was the anger of a woman who had been pushed too far. Jessica hadn't just spilled water on me. She had tried to wash away my dignity. She thought she could treat me like dirt and get away with it because, in her world, I was a nobody. She and Michael were on their way to a glittering gala to court the favor of a powerful, anonymous benefactor. They had no idea that the woman they had just humiliated held the keys to the very kingdom they were so desperate to enter. The irony was so bitter. It was almost laughable. I stepped out of the shower, my mind clear for the first time in days. The conflict was over. I had lost the battle for my son's loyalty, but I was about to start a war for my own self-respect. I wrapped myself in a thick towel and walked to my bedside table. I picked up my phone. There was only one person I could call. David Chen's office. A crisp, professional voice answered. It's Eleanor Vance. I said. Is he available? Mrs. Vance. Of course. One moment, please. David had been Arthur's financial advisor and had become my closest confidant after his death. He was the executive director of the Starlight Foundation, the only other person in the world who knew I was its founder. He was a man of immense integrity and quiet strength, the kind of man I had hoped my son would become. Ellie. David's warm, calm voice came on the line. Is everything all right? It's unusual for you to call on a Saturday. I'm fine, David. But I'm calling to make a change of plans for tonight's gala. Oh? What's on your mind? I'll be attending, I said. There was a brief pause on the other end. Well, that's a wonderful surprise. I'll have a ticket waiting for you at the door. I can seat you at my table. Of course. No, David, I said, my voice steady. That won't be necessary. I won't be sitting at your table. I'll be sitting on the stage. Another pause. This one longer. I could almost hear the gears turning in his sharp mind. Ellie, are you sure? We've guarded your anonymity for a decade. It's been one of the founding principles. Principles can adapt, I said, looking at my reflection in the mirror. My gray-streaked hair was damp. My face was bare. But my eyes were blazing. It's time. I want to be introduced tonight. As the founder. May I ask what brought this on? He asked gently. I thought about telling him everything. About Jessica's cruelty. About Michael's betrayal. About the dirty water and the cold. Hard shame. But I didn't. This wasn't about revenge. Not entirely. It was about reclamation. Let's just say I've been reminded of the importance of being seen for who you truly are. I said. And I have a speech I need to give. David didn't press further. He knew me well enough to hear the steel in my voice. All right, Ellie. Consider it done. We'll need to move quickly. The introduction is scheduled for 9 o'clock. It's almost 2 now. Do you need anything? A car? A dress? The mention of a dress made me glance at the sodden heap on my bathroom floor. Yes, I said. I think I do. Can you arrange it? Something memorable. I know just the person, he said. His voice now filled with a quiet excitement. He understood. He didn't know the whole story, but he understood the shift. I'll have a car and a stylist at your house by 4. We'll handle everything. You just be ready. Ellie, the world is about to meet the real Eleanor Vance. Thank you, David, I said. And for the first time that day, I smiled. I'll be ready. After the call, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The decision was made. The wheels were in motion. There was no going back. I made myself a cup of tea, a proper one this time, and sat in my living room. The floor was still damp in places. Faint, sour smell still hung in the air. It was a reminder. A fuel. I thought about the speech I would give. The words began to form in my mind, not out of spite, but out of a deep, sorrowful clarity. I would talk about value, about the difference between the glitter of wealth and the glow of charity, about how we build our legacy not with what we acquire, but with what we give. And I would talk about how easy it is to overlook the most valuable things when you are blinded by ambition. I wouldn't name them. I wouldn't have to. Everyone at their table, everyone in the city who knew them, would understand. And they would know that I understood. At precisely 4 o'clock, a black town car, far more discreet than Michael's SUV, pulled up to my curb. A woman with a chic, asymmetrical haircut and a kind smile stepped out. She was followed by 2 assistants carrying garment bags that seemed to whisper of elegance and expense. Mrs. Vance? I'm Chloe, the woman said. David sent me. He said you needed something for a rather special occasion. She stepped inside and her professional I took in my modest surroundings without a flicker of judgment. We have a few options, she said, as her assistants gracefully unzipped the bags. The dresses they revealed were breathtaking. One was a shimmering silver, another a deep emerald green. But my eyes were drawn to the last one. It was a gown of midnight blue silk. It was simple in its cut but exquisitely tailored, designed to flow and catch the light. It was elegant, powerful, and understated. It was perfect. That one, I said, without hesitation. For the next few hours, my little bungalow was transformed into a high-end salon. Chloe was a magician. She styled my hair in a sophisticated chignon that highlighted the silver streaks I had earned over 60 years of life. Her makeup application was subtle, designed to enhance, not to mask. She didn't try to make me look younger. She made me look timeless. As I slipped into the silk gown, it felt less like a costume and more like armor. It was the uniform of a woman who knew her own worth. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. But it wasn't the stranger Jessica had wanted to create. This was a version of me I hadn't seen in a long time. It was Eleanor Vance, the partner, the builder, the woman who had helped create a legacy. It was the woman Arthur had always seen. "You look magnificent," Chloe said, her voice soft with genuine admiration. "Absolutely magnificent." The drive to the hotel downtown was quiet. I watched the familiar streets of my neighborhood give way to the gleaming towers of the city center. I thought of Michael and Jessica, likely already at the hotel, schmoozing and networking. I imagined their excitement, their nervous energy. They would be scanning the room, trying to guess which of the city's titans was the mysterious starlight benefactor. They would never, in a million years, guess it was the woman they had left dripping in their wake just a few hours earlier. The car pulled up to the service entrance of the Grand Hotel, as David had arranged. He was waiting for me just inside, looking dapper in his tuxedo. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Ellie," he breathed. "Wow. Just, wow. It's all smoke and mirrors, David," I said with a small smile. "No," he replied, his gaze serious. "The dress is new, but the woman wearing it has always been there. We've just finally given her the right lighting." He offered me his arm. "Are you ready?" He led me through a series of quiet back corridors, our footsteps echoing on the polished floors. We bypassed the grand lobby, the crowds, the red carpet. We were heading straight for the backstage area of the ballroom. As we got closer, the sounds of the gala grew louder, the music, the laughter, the buzz of 1,000 conversations. It was the sound of my son's ambition. David led me to a small, private waiting room behind the stage. "The MC will call me up first to say a few words," he explained. "Then he'll introduce you. Just wait for your cue. I'll be right there." He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze and left. I was alone again. But this time, the solitude was a comfort. It was the calm before the storm. Through a monitor in the room, I could see the ballroom. It was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns. The camera panned across the tables. And then I saw them. Table 12. Right in the middle of the room. Michael looked tense, his eyes scanning the crowd with a hungry look. Jessica was radiant, laughing and touching the arm of the man next to her. A well-known real estate mogul. She was in her element. A predator in a jungle of wealth. She looked beautiful. And she looked utterly blind. I watched them for a long time, feeling a strange detachment. The fierce, maternal love I had always felt was still there. But it was now tempered by a profound sadness. I loved my son, but I did not like the man he had become. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers, and I saw David walk onto the stage to a round of polite applause. It was almost time. I walked out of the waiting room and stood in the wings, hidden in the shadows, the heavy velvet curtain cool against my fingers. I could feel the vibration of the applause through the floor. David spoke eloquently about the foundation's work, about their commitment to the unseen and unheard in the city. He was a good man. Then, he came to the part one was waiting for. "And now," David said, his voice ringing with pride, "it is my profound honor to introduce the woman whose vision and generosity made all of this possible. For 10 years, she has been our guiding star, our starlight. Please join me in welcoming, for the very first time, the founder of the Starlight Foundation, Mrs. Eleanor Vance." The name echoed through the ballroom. My name. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the shadows, and walked into the light. The moment I stepped onto the stage, 1,000 pairs of eyes turned towards me. A brilliant, white spotlight found my face, momentarily blinding me. For a split second, my carefully constructed composure wavered. The sheer scale of the room, the sea of expectant faces, was overwhelming. The applause was a deafening wave of sound. They were clapping for a name, for a myth. They had no idea who I was. But my son did. As my vision adjusted, I let my gaze sweep across the ballroom, deliberately searching for table 12. And I found it. The camera feed on the monitor backstage had not prepared me for the raw, unfiltered shock of seeing them in person. Jessica was the first to react. Her practiced, charming smile froze on her face. Her hand, which had been gracefully holding a champagne flute, stopped midway to her lips. The glass tilted, and a small, unnoticed stream of gold liquid trickled onto the white tablecloth. Her eyes were wide. Her perfectly painted lips parted in a silent, disbelieving "oh." The color drained from her face, leaving her foundation looking like a pale, chalky mask. The predator had just seen a ghost. And Michael, my son, his reaction was a slower, more profound implosion. He didn't gasp or freeze. Instead, he seemed to shrink into his tuxedo. His shoulders, which he always held so straight and proud, slumped forward. His head tilted down, as if the weight of the spotlight on me was a physical burden he could not bear. He slowly lifted his gaze to meet mine across the vast room. In his eyes, I saw a maelstrom of emotions, utter disbelief, dawning horror, and a deep, gut-wrenching shame that was 1,000 times more potent than the kind he had felt in my living room. This wasn't the shame of being associated with a poor, simple mother. This was the shame of a man who had just realized he had committed a monumental, unforgivable sin against a queen, all while believing she was a peasant. The polite applause began to falter as people noticed the name, and the woman didn't seem to match any known philanthropist on their radar. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vance? Who is Eleanor Vance? I could almost hear them thinking it. This quiet, older woman in the elegant blue dress was the powerhouse behind the Starlight Foundation? It didn't compute. David stepped forward and gently guided me to the podium. He gave my arm a discreet, supportive squeeze before retreating to the side of the stage. The murmuring slowly died down, replaced by a tense, curious silence. The entire ballroom was waiting. My son and his wife were holding their breath. I adjusted the microphone, the simple action feeling momentous. My hands were steady. The anger from earlier had cooled into a calm, focused resolve. I looked out at the crowd, past the glittering diamonds and starched collars, and for a moment, I let my eyes rest on Michael and Jessica. I wanted them to know that I saw them, that this was for them. Then, I began to speak. "Good evening," I said, my voice clear and even amplified throughout the cavernous room. "Thank you, David, for that kind introduction. And thank you all for being here tonight to support a cause that is very, very dear to my heart." I paused, letting the words settle. For 10 years, I have chosen to remain anonymous. I did so not out of shyness, but out of a core belief. A belief I shared with my late husband, Arthur. We always felt that true charity isn't about the giver. It's not about recognition or applause. It's about the act itself. It's about seeing a need and meeting it, quietly and effectively, without expecting anything in return. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jessica flinch. The word quietly seemed to hang in the air around their table. My husband was a brilliant man, I continued, my voice softening with genuine emotion. He saw the world in a unique way. He built a successful company from an idea in our garage. But we never measured our success by the numbers in our bank account. We measured it by the life we built, the values we held, and the son we raised. At the mention of their son, I saw Michael physically recoil. He squeezed his eyes shut for a brief moment, as if in pain. We taught him to value integrity, to value kindness, to value people for who they are on the inside, not for the clothes they wear or the house they live in. We believe that a person's true worth is like the foundation of a building. It's not the part you see, not the fancy facade or the decorative trim. It's the strong, unseen, unglamorous part that holds everything up. Without it, no matter how beautiful the exterior, the whole structure is worthless. It's just a hollow shell, destined to collapse. The room was utterly silent now. The clinking of glasses had stopped. The whispers had ceased. They were listening, captivated by the unexpected turn this speech was taking. It wasn't the usual litany of thank yous and fundraising statistics. It felt personal. It felt real. I took a sip of water from the glass on the podium. My gaze drifted back to table 12. Jessica was now staring at her plate, her knuckles white as she gripped a fork. She looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Michael was still looking at me, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked trapped. He was. Lately, I said, my voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate, more direct. I've been thinking a lot about value, about how we recognize it, or, more importantly, how we sometimes fail to recognize it. We live in a world that is obsessed with image, with brands and presentation. We are so busy trying to look successful that we sometimes forget how to be good. Sometimes, the most valuable things in our lives are the ones we take for granted, the ones that have always been there, quietly supporting us, loving us unconditionally. And sometimes, we get so blinded by the pursuit of shiny, new things that we treat those valuable, foundational things with contempt. We see them as old-fashioned, as an obstacle, as an embarrassment. Each word was a carefully aimed dart. I saw Michael lower his head, unable to take any more. The man sitting next to Jessica, the real estate mogul, leaned over and whispered something to her. She just shook her head, not looking up. The social triumph she had engineered was turning into a public relations nightmare, right before her eyes. And it's a funny thing about value, I said, leaning slightly into the microphone, my voice filled with a quiet intensity. You can't always see it. A diamond in the rough just looks like a stone. A masterpiece hidden in an attic is just a dusty canvas. And a person's worth can't be judged by their address or their wardrobe. Now came the part one had rehearsed in my mind all afternoon. The part that had been born from the sting of dirty water and a broken heart. You can't see true value. For instance, when it's standing right in front of you, I said, my voice ringing with a powerful, sorrowful clarity, soaking wet, and covered in filth. A collective, soft gasp went through the part of the ballroom that knew the Van Cess. A few heads subtly turned towards Michael's table. The silence there was no longer just tense. It was radioactive. I had not been specific. I had not mentioned a mop bucket or a clumsy daughter-in-law. I didn't need to. I had painted a picture. And for the two people who mattered most, that picture was as vivid and damning as a photograph. I had stripped them bare in a room full of their idols, not by revealing my wealth, but by revealing their character. I let the image hang in the air for a long moment. Then, I visibly straightened up, my tone shifting back to something more formal, more presidential. The personal part was over. The lesson had been delivered. The Starlight Foundation was built to see the value in people that others overlook. The single mother working 2 jobs. The student from a poor neighborhood with a brilliant mind. The family that loses everything in a fire. They are not embarrassing. They are not obstacles. They are the heart of this city. They are the ones with true strength. They are the diamonds in the rough. And our job is to help them shine. That is our mission. That is Arthur's legacy. And it is my life's work. I looked out across the room, my gaze sweeping over them all one last time before pointedly avoiding table 12. Thank you for your generosity. And please, enjoy the rest of your evening. I stepped back from the podium. For a second, there was dead silence. The crowd seemed stunned, processing what they had just heard. Then, one person started clapping. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. The applause was thunderous. A genuine, roaring ovation that was 10 times louder than the polite reception I had first received. They weren't clapping for a name anymore. They were clapping for the woman who had just bared a piece of her soul on that stage. David came and took my arm, his eyes shining with pride, as he led me off the stage. I took one last look back. Michael had finally lifted his head. Our eyes met one last time across the glittering expanse. There was no anger in his face. No defiance. Only a look of complete and utter devastation. The kind of devastation that comes when you realize you have just destroyed the most valuable thing you will ever have. Walking off that stage felt like stepping from a storm into a quiet harbor. The thunderous applause faded behind me as David led me back into the hushed, carpeted corridor. My adrenaline was still singing, but the icy resolve that had carried me through the speech was beginning to thaw, leaving a profound sense of exhaustion in its wake. I had done it. I had said what needed to be said. And now, I had to live with the consequences. Ellie. That was. David started, his voice thick with emotion. He shook his head, at a loss for words. That was one of the most powerful things I have ever witnessed. It was what needed to be done. David, I said, my voice weary. I leaned against the cool wall of the hallway, the silk of my dress a fragile barrier against the solid plaster. Are you all right? He asked, his professional demeanor replaced by the concern of a true friend. I will be, I said. I need a moment. He nodded, understanding completely. Take all the time you need. I have to go back out there. Manage the fallout. There are about 500 very influential people who are now desperate to meet you. The board members are probably having a collective aneurysm. He gave me a small, wry smile. I'll run interference. The car is waiting for you at the service entrance whenever you're ready to go. Thank you, David, for everything. It was my honor, Ellie, he said, before turning and heading back towards the ballroom. Left alone in the quiet hallway, the weight of the evening finally settled on me. I had won. I had defended my dignity and put Jessica and Michael in their place in the most public and undeniable way possible. I had claimed my power. So why did I feel so hollow? The triumph was tainted with a deep, aching sadness. Victory over your own child is a bitter prize. I didn't want to face the fawning crowds, the curious benefactors, or the shocked board members. I just wanted to go home, to my quiet street, my worn armchair, and my overflowing bookshelves, to the life they had deemed so pathetic. I started the walk back towards the service entrance, my heels sinking softly into the plush runner. The corridor was long, and as I walked, the faint sounds of the gala began to return, a distant echo of music and conversation. As I rounded a corner, I saw two figures standing near an exit, silhouetted against the dim light. They were arguing in hushed, frantic tones. It was Michael and Jessica. They hadn't seen me. I instinctively shrank back into the shadows of a recessed doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I should just walk away, get in my car and leave. But I was frozen, an unwilling eavesdropper on the wreckage I had created. How could you not tell me? Jessica's voice was a venomous whisper. It had lost all its polished charm and was now raw and ragged with fury. How could you let me treat her like that? You let me make a complete and utter fool of myself. How was I supposed to know? Michael shot back, his voice cracking with despair. She works in a bookstore. She lives in that tiny house. She drives a 10-year-old car. Nothing about her life makes any sense. Did you ever, for 1 second, think my mother was a secret multimillionaire? It's your mother. You should have known something. She hissed. You should have known she wasn't just some simple old woman. You let me pour a bucket of dirty water on the founder of the Starlight Foundation. Her voice rose in pitch, bordering on hysteria. Do you have any idea what we've just done? Our reputation in this city is over. Finished. We're a laughingstock. You think I don't know that? Michael's voice was filled with a self-loathing so profound it was painful to hear. I stood there and I let you do it. I was ashamed of her. I was ashamed of her for being everything my father would have been proud of. He dragged his hands through his hair, his body trembling. It wasn't about you. It was me. All of it. I'm the one who pushed this. I'm the one who wanted to climb, who wanted to be seen. I was ashamed of where I came from. Well, congratulations, Michael. She spat. Now you have something new to be ashamed of. We're ruined. The partners at your firm were at our table. The Astors. Everyone heard that speech. Everyone saw us. They'll never do business with you now. They'll never invite us anywhere again. We're social pariahs. Is that all you care about? He asked. His voice suddenly quiet. Dangerously so. The parties? The business deals? My mother just disowned me in front of the entire city. She looked at me like she didn't even know me. And all you can think about is our social standing? What else is there to think about? Jessica cried. Her self-pity absolute. She has everything. She has all this money and she let us struggle. She let us think we had to claw our way up. She played a game with us. No, Michael said, the realization dawning on his face. His voice filled with a terrible clarity. She wasn't playing a game. She was just living her life. A life of integrity. We're the ones who were playing a game. And we just lost. There was a long silence. I could hear Jessica's ragged breathing. What are we going to do? She finally whispered. The fight draining out of her. Replaced by a pathetic whimper. I don't know what we are going to do, Michael said. His tone flat and empty. But I know what I have to do. I have to try and talk to her. I have to. His voice broke. I have to apologize. She'll never forgive you, Jessica said. Her voice devoid of hope. Not after this. I know, he whispered. But I have to try. He turned and started walking down the corridor, directly towards my hiding place. My heart leaped into my throat. I couldn't face him now. Not like this. Not after hearing every word. With a surge of panic, I slipped out of my hiding spot and hurried in the opposite direction, my heels clicking urgently on the floor. I didn't look back. I practically ran the last 50 feet to the service exit, pushed the door open, and burst out into the cool night air. The uniformed driver, who had been waiting patiently by the town car, straightened up in surprise. Home, Mrs. Vance? He asked. Yes, please, I gasped, my voice thin. As quickly as possible. I sank into the plush leather of the back seat, my body trembling. The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, gliding into the glittering river of downtown traffic. I looked out the window, but I didn't see the city lights. I saw my son's devastated face. I heard his broken voice. I was ashamed of her. The words echoed in my soul. The hollow victory in the ballroom felt even more desolate now. I had wanted to teach them a lesson about value, and I had succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. But the lesson had come at a terrible cost. I had shattered my son's world. The polished, ambitious man he had tried to become was gone, and in his place was a broken man, stripped of his pride and his illusions. The drive home was the longest of my life. When the car finally pulled up to my small brick bungalow, it had never looked more like a sanctuary. I thanked the driver and hurried inside, locking the door behind me. I shed the magnificent blue dress, letting it fall to the floor in a silken pool. I changed into my old, comfortable nightgown. I stood in the center of my quiet living room, the house silent around me. The faint, sour smell of the dirty mop water was gone, but the memory of it was seared into my mind. I had set out this morning to reclaim my dignity. I had ended the night by possibly losing my son forever. I sank into Arthur's armchair, the worn fabric of familiar comfort. I thought of what Michael had said. She was everything my father would have been proud of. A single, hot tear finally escaped and traced a path down my cheek. He was right. Arthur would have been proud of the woman on that stage. But he would have been heartbroken by the reason she had to be there. The phone rang, its shrill sound tearing through the silence. I looked at the caller ID. It was Michael. My hand hovered over the phone, my thumb trembling. I could answer it. I could listen to his apology, his excuses, his pain. Or I could let it ring. Let him sit with the consequences of his actions. Let the silence be his punishment. I thought about his face in the ballroom, the utter desolation in his eyes. I thought about his voice in the hallway, cracking with a self-hatred that no mother should ever want to hear. What was the right thing to do? What does a mother do when her child has broken her heart, but has also broken his own? The phone continued its insistent ringing, a desperate plea in the quiet darkness of my home. Each ring was a question. Forgiveness or justice? The ringing of the phone seemed to go on forever. Each shrill burst a fresh wave of conflict washing over me. My thumb hovered over the screen, poised between the green accept and the red decline buttons. It felt like the most monumental decision of my life. To answer was to open the door to a painful, complicated conversation I wasn't ready for. To ignore it was to build the wall between us higher, perhaps insurmountably so. Finally, on the sixth ring, my body made the decision for me. I couldn't do it. Not yet. The wound was too fresh. The words I'd overheard too raw. I let the call go to voicemail. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of the unanswered plea. A moment later, the phone buzzed with a new notification. A voicemail from Michael. And then a text. "Mom, please pick up. I know you're there. I need to talk to you." Another text followed immediately. "I am so sorry. More sorry than I can say. Please." I stared at the messages, the words blurring through the film of my tears. I couldn't bring myself to listen to his voice, not even a recorded version. I set the phone face down on the end table, as if to silence his digital ghost. I needed space. I needed time. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a fortress I was defending. Sleep did not come easily. I tossed and turned, the events of the day playing on a loop in my mind, the cold shock of the dirty water, the look of shame on Michael's face, the glare of the spotlight, the devastation in his eyes as I walked off stage, the desperate sound of his voice in the hallway. I had wanted to hurt him, to make him feel a fraction of the pain he had caused me. And I had succeeded. The thought brought me no comfort. It only left a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. The next morning, I woke to the gray light of dawn feeling groggy and heartsick. The first thing I did was check my phone. There were 3 more missed calls from Michael, all from late the previous night. And another text, sent just after midnight. "I know I don't deserve it, but I love you. I've ruined everything. I'm so sorry. Mom." I finally worked up the courage to listen to the first voicemail he'd left. I pressed the play button, holding the phone to my ear. "Mom, it's me." His voice was thick and raspy, as if he'd been crying. I just saw you. On the stage. I don't know what to say. I'm at the hotel. Oh God. Mom, what have I done?" He took a shaky breath. "I'm such a fool. Stupid. Arrogant fool. Everything you said. It was all true. I'm so sorry. Please. Just call me. Please." The recording ended. I sank back against my pillows, the sound of his brokenness a physical weight on my chest. This was the son I remembered. The sensitive boy who felt things deeply. Where had he been for the last few years? Buried under layers of ambition and insecurity, it seemed. And I was the one who had just violently excavated him. The day passed in a haze. I didn't go to the bookstore. I couldn't face the sympathetic or curious looks from my colleagues who had undoubtedly read about the gala in the morning news. The story was everywhere. The starlight revealed. Secret philanthropist Eleanor Vance stunned Chicago elite. The articles were mostly fawning, praising my humility, my decade of quiet generosity, and my powerful, deeply personal speech. A few society columns hinted at a family drama, noting the visible discomfort of my son and his wife, but they were discreet. They didn't have to spell it out. The story was in the subtext, in the space between the lines. David called in the afternoon. Just checking in, he said, his voice gentle. The city is buzzing. You're the most popular woman in Chicago today. I feel like the loneliest, I confessed. Have you spoken to him? David asked, already knowing the answer. No. He's called and texted. I can't bring myself to answer. Take your time, Ellie, he said. What you did took immense strength. It's okay to need time to recover. But, he added carefully, don't let the silence harden into a permanent wall. He's your son. I know, I whispered. That's what makes it all so painful. Later that day, there was a knock at the door. Not the insistent, frantic knock I might have expected from Michael, but a soft, hesitant rap. My heart hammered against my ribs. I peered through the peephole. It was Michael. He was alone. He looked terrible. His face was pale and puffy, with dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing the same tuxedo trousers from the night before, but with a rumpled t-shirt. He looked like a man who had been through a war and lost. He was just standing on my porch, his hands shoved in his pockets, staring at my front door as if he could will it to open. He wasn't knocking again. He was just waiting. I stood there for a full minute, my hand on the doorknob, my mind racing. I couldn't hide forever. David was right. I had to face this. I took a deep breath, turned the lock, and opened the door. He flinched when he saw me, as if he were expecting a blow. His eyes, the same shade of blue as his father's, were filled with a profound and bottomless shame. Mom, he breathed, his voice hoarse. I didn't say anything. I just stepped back, holding the door open. It was an invitation, albeit a cool one. He hesitated for a second, then walked slowly inside, into the living room he had so recently found so distasteful. He stood awkwardly in the center of the room, not daring to sit down. He looked at Arthur's armchair, then quickly looked away. Thank you for letting me in, he stammered. I closed the door and turned to face him, my arms crossed over my chest. It was a defensive posture, and I knew it. What do you want, Michael? I asked, my voice flat. I wanted to apologize, he said, his eyes fixed on the floor. In person. Though I know an apology isn't enough. It's not nearly enough. He finally looked up at me, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. What you said on that stage. You were right. About everything. About me. I got so lost. Mom. So caught up in all of it. He gestured vaguely, as if to encompass the entire world of ambition and status that had consumed him. I thought it was what I was supposed to want. What would make me successful? What would make me important? And was I not important? I asked, the question sharp and cold. He visibly winced. You were the most important thing, he whispered. And I treated you like you were nothing. Worse than nothing. I let Jess humiliate you. And I just stood there. I was ashamed. Not of her, but of you. And that is the most disgusting thing I have ever done. It makes me sick to even think about it." He choked on the words, a sob catching in his throat. "When I saw you on that stage, when I realized who you were, what you've been doing all these years, quietly, while I was so busy trying to be loud, it was like the whole world fell out from under me. Everything I thought was real was fake. And the one thing I thought was simple was the most real and powerful thing in my life. And I had thrown it away." His confession was raw and painful, and every word landed on my heart like a blow from a hammer. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? For him to see the truth? But seeing his pain, his utter self-abasement, was agonizing. "Where is Jessica?" I asked, my voice still cold. He shook his head, looking away again. "I don't know. I left the hotel this morning. I told her I had to come here. She didn't understand. She's still focused on the damage to our reputation, the social fallout." He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "She said I was a fool for coming here, for groveling. I don't think we can come back from this. Our marriage, I think it was built on that hollow foundation you talked about." The admission hung in the air between us. The life he had built, the one he had sacrificed his relationship with me for, was crumbling around him. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't deserve it. I wouldn't forgive me. But I had to tell you that I know. I see it all now. I see you. And I am so sorry. For everything." He stood there, a broken man in the middle of my living room, offering up the shattered pieces of his life. He had said everything I needed to hear. He had validated my pain, acknowledged his faults, and understood the depth of his betrayal. The anger that had sustained me for 2 days finally dissolved, leaving behind only a vast and aching sorrow. I looked at my son, my foolish, misguided, broken son, and I saw the little boy who used to hold my hand when he crossed the street, the teenager who I'd taught to drive in this very neighborhood, the young man who had wept at his father's funeral. He was still in there. My arms slowly uncrossed. I took a step towards him. He watched me, his expression full of a desperate, fragile hope. This was the moment, the turning point, the climax of not just the past few days, but the past few years. Would I offer him a lifeline? Or would I let him drown in the mess he had made? The entire future of our relationship hinged on what I would say or do next. The silence in the room was a living thing, stretching between us, taut with years of unspoken feelings and the fresh, gaping wound of the last few days. Michael stood before me, utterly exposed, waiting for my judgment. The righteous anger that had been my shield had crumbled, and now, all I felt was the profound, gut-wrenching sorrow of a mother witnessing her child's self-destruction. I looked at his face, stripped of its ambitious swagger, and saw only the pain and regret that had carved new lines around his eyes. He was my son, and he was suffering. In that moment, I knew that holding on to my anger would be a punishment for me as much as it was for him. It would be a cold and lonely victory. My feet moved before my mind had fully processed the decision. I closed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around him. For a second, he remained perfectly still, rigid with shock, as if he couldn't believe it was happening. Then, a shudder ran through his entire body, and he collapsed against me. His arms came around me, clutching me with a desperate strength, and he began to sob. Not quiet, restrained tears, but huge, wrenching sobs that shook his whole frame. He buried his face in my shoulder, and I held him, just as I had when he was a little boy who had fallen and scraped his knee. I held him while he mourned the man he had become, and the relationship he had broken. "I'm so sorry, Mom." He wept into my shoulder, the words muffled and thick. "I'm so sorry." "I know," I whispered, stroking his hair. "I know you are." We stood like that for a long time, The clock on the mantelpiece ticking away the silent seconds. There were no more words of accusation. No more need for apologies. There was only the raw, unfiltered truth of our shared grief. A grief for what we had lost and what we had almost destroyed completely. Finally, his sobs subsided into shaky breaths. He pulled back slowly, his face red and tear-streaked. He looked exhausted, but also, for the first time in years, at peace. The mask was gone. "Come," I said, my voice gentle. "Sit down." I led him to the sofa, and we sat, not too close, but no longer separated by an unbridgeable chasm. I went to the kitchen and made us both a cup of tea. The simple, domestic act of balm for our frayed nerves. When I returned, he was staring at the worn pattern on the rug, his hands clasped between his knees. I handed him a mug, and he took it with trembling hands. "I never knew," he said quietly, looking at me over the rim of the cup. "About the foundation. About any of it. Why didn't you ever tell me?" I sat down in Arthur's armchair, the familiar comfort of it grounding me. "It wasn't a secret, Michael. It was just private. After your father died, the money felt like a burden. It was a constant reminder of him, of what we built, but it wasn't who we were. The Starlight Foundation was my way of turning that burden into a blessing. It was a way to honor his memory, to continue the work we always planned to do. It was never about the recognition. It was about the work." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. And, if I'm being honest, part of me was afraid. I saw how the world was changing, how much emphasis was placed on wealth and status. I saw it in Jessica, and I started to see it in you. I was afraid that if you knew the extent of the fortune, it would change you. It would become the focus, instead of the values your father and I tried to instill in you. My voice broke slightly. "It seems I was right to be afraid. You changed anyway." He looked down into his tea, the admission hitting him hard. "You were." "I did. I let it happen. I let Jessica's ambitions become my own. I wanted to impress her, to give her the life she wanted. And I thought the only way to do that was to climb, to network, to be someone else. I started to see your life, this house, the bookstore. I saw it through her eyes, as something to be ashamed of, something holding me back." "And now?" I asked. He looked around the room, but this time, I could see he was really looking at it. At the faded photographs on the mantelpiece, at the stacks of well-read books, at the comfortable, lived-in reality of a life built on love, not on appearances. "Now," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I see that it's the only thing that was ever real. This is my home. This is where I came from. It's not a source of shame. It's a source of everything. And I almost threw it all away for a penthouse apartment and a table at a fancy party." He set his mug down, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "I'm leaving Jessica," he said, the words stark and final. My breath caught. "Michael, are you sure? You don't have to make such a big decision right now." "Yes, I do," he said, his gaze steady and clear. "It's been over for a long time, Mom. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. The gala, your speech, it didn't break our marriage. It just held a mirror up to it. And what I saw was ugly and empty. It was a business partnership, not a marriage. We weren't building a life. We were building a brand. And I can't live like that anymore. I don't want to be that person." He looked so much like his father in that moment, resolved, clear-eyed, and certain. The years of insecurity seemed to have been stripped away, leaving behind the man he was always meant to be. The lesson had been brutal, but perhaps necessary. "What will you do?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. And for the first time, the uncertainty in his voice didn't sound like fear, but like freedom. I need to figure out who I am again. Without the fancy suit and the job title. I need to find my own foundation. We sat in a comfortable silence for a while, the tea warming our hands. The barrier between us was gone, but we both knew things would never be exactly as they were. A scar would always remain. Trust, once so badly broken, would have to be rebuilt slowly, one honest conversation at a time. This was not a magical, happy ending. It was a difficult, painful new beginning. After about an hour, he stood up to leave. At the door, he turned back to me. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. "About the foundation. All that money. I don't want any of it. I need you to know that. This isn't about that. I need to make my own way. The right way. This time." I nodded, my heart swelling with a cautious pride. "I know, Michael. I never for a moment thought it was." He gave me a small, sad smile, and then he was gone. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the profound exhaustion of the emotional marathon I had just run. The storm had passed. My house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was no longer the silence of loneliness and anger. It was the silence of healing. A fragile peace had settled, not just in my home, but in my heart. The path forward would be long, for both of us, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Not the naive hope that had been so cruelly shattered, but a stronger, more resilient hope. The kind that is forged in fire and built on the hard-won truth. The days that followed were quiet and strangely surreal. The city was still buzzing with the story of the Starlight Gala, and my face seemed to be in every newspaper and on every local news channel. Reporters occasionally camped out at the end of my street, hoping for a comment. I ignored them all, retreating into the peaceful anonymity of my home and the familiar comfort of O'Malley's bookstore. My boss, a gruff but kind man named Frank, simply grunted when I came back to work. "'Bout time," he said, handing me a stack of new arrivals to shelve. "These books won't organize themselves." His gruff normalcy was the greatest gift he could have given me. Michael kept his word. He moved out of the penthouse he had shared with Jessica and into a small, furnished apartment across town. He called me every few days, not to ask for anything, but just to talk. Our conversations were tentative at first, navigating the minefield of our recent past. We didn't talk about Jessica or the mop bucket. We didn't need to. Instead, we talked about books, about the garden, about memories of his father. He told me he had resigned from his high-powered marketing job. "I can't do it anymore," he explained over the phone one evening. "I can't sell things to people they don't need." I spent all day in a meeting about how to create aspirational desire for a new line of luxury watches, and I just felt sick. It's all a part of the same lie I was living. "What will you do?" I asked, a familiar question. "I'm still figuring that out," he said. "But for the first time, feels exciting, not terrifying." He started volunteering at a soup kitchen downtown, a place the Starlight Foundation had funded for years. He didn't tell them who he was, or who his mother was. He just showed up, put on an apron, and started chopping vegetables and washing dishes. He was looking for his own foundation, brick by painful brick. As for Jessica, she and her lawyers were swift. The divorce was proceeding, driven by her fury and humiliation. I heard through David, who heard through the city's relentless gossip mill, that she was trying to position herself as the victim, a woman deceived by a husband and his secretive, manipulative mother. It didn't seem to be working. The story of the dirty water had leaked, whispered at cocktail parties and charity luncheons, becoming a cautionary tale among the city's elite about the dangers of mistaking humility for weakness. Jessica, who had so desperately wanted to be a part of their world, had become a punchline. Her lifestyle blog went silent. Her brand had been irrevocably broken. About a month after the gala, David asked me to lunch. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant, place Arthur and I used to love. He's doing well, you know, David said, after we'd ordered. Michael. I know, I said, a small smile touching my lips. He seems lighter. He came to see me last week. David continued. He had a proposal. He wants to start a new program under the Starlight umbrella, a vocational training center for people experiencing homelessness, teaching practical skills, carpentry, coding, culinary arts, giving people a hand up, not a handout. I looked at him, surprised and deeply moved. That's a wonderful idea. It is, David agreed. It's well-researched, practical, and compassionate. It's exactly the kind of thing Arthur would have championed. He leaned forward. He wants to run it. Ellie. Not as a high-paid executive. He wants to be on the ground, working with the people he's helping. He doesn't want a salary beyond a simple living wage. He just wants to do the work. My eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of pride. The hot, clean anger had been replaced by a quiet joy. The broken man who had sobbed in my living room was gone. In his place was a man who was building something real, something of value. He had found his way back. Not to me, but to himself. What do you think? David asked gently. I think, I said, my voice thick with emotion, that it's the best idea I've ever heard. Our relationship wasn't magically healed. The scar was still there. Faint, silvery line on the surface of our lives. A reminder of the pain we had both caused and endured. There were still moments of awkwardness. Still sentences left unsaid. Forgiveness is not an event. It's a process. But we were on the path together. He would come over for dinner once a week. And we would sit in my kitchen. The same kitchen where he had stood by and let his mother be humiliated. And we would talk. We would laugh. We would slowly, carefully, rebuild. One crisp autumn evening, a few months later, Michael came over for our weekly dinner. He seemed particularly thoughtful. After we had cleared the dishes, he turned to me. I was at the hardware store today, he said, buying supplies for the new center, and I saw a mop and a bucket. I held my breath. We had never spoken of it directly, and I just stood there for a minute. He continued, his eyes meeting mine, clear and direct. I thought about that day. I thought about the look on your face. And I realized something. You didn't just wash a dress that day. Mom, you had to wash me out of your life, just for a little while, to clean out the filth I'd become. He shook his head, a look of wonder on his face. It must have been the hardest thing you've ever had to do. It was, I whispered, my heart aching with the memory. Thank you, he said, his voice soft but strong. Thank you for doing it. You saved me. Mom, you saved me from myself. In that moment, I felt the last vestiges of the scar fade away. The healing was complete. I had my son back. Not the one I had lost to ambition, but a better, stronger, more compassionate version. A man his father would have been profoundly proud of. A man I was proud of. I still live in my little brick bungalow. I still work part-time at O'Malley's. To the world, I am Eleanor Vance, the Starlight patron, a titan of philanthropy. But here, in the quiet of my own home, surrounded by the scent of old books and the memory of a great love, I am just Eleanor, a mother, a widow, a woman who knows her own value. And that, I have come to understand, is the greatest fortune of all. The lights of the gala have long since faded, but the quiet glow of my own small, cherished life has never burned brighter.